If you're spending loads of money on Isak, we know how good he is. You play him where he wants to play. For Ekitike, it might just have to be a case of being patient, maybe playing second fiddle, sort of fitting in around Isak. Ekitike is such a talented, dynamic forward. Liverpool are probably onto quite a good thing there.
Hello and welcome to The Window, your daily transfer update brought to you by talkSPORT and talkSPORT Bet. I'm Anna Smith and today we're doing another one of our stats deep dives. Joining me today is Ryan Benson from Opta Analyst. It does feel like there's only one place to start still, Alexander Isak. As the week goes on, it does feel like we're getting closer and closer potentially to that move to Liverpool, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, full disclosure, I don't have any insider information or anything, but I don't know if I was to back either way at the moment, for me it feels probably more like it's gonna happen. I mean, I think there's been a lot of talk about Liverpool and like kind of the money that they've already spent and how this links into that. But I think we also have to remember that they've got a lot of money anyway. They've generated quite a lot of funds from good sales this summer, and I think if we assume that that Isak has actually asked to leave, I think on the balance of probability, it feels like it's one that would probably happen. That's my hunch anyway.
Obviously, it's really easy to see why he's top of like many people's wish list. But in terms of this Liverpool team, obviously they've already bolstered this summer. You know, just getting that Ekitike signing over the line. How exactly do you see him fitting in this Liverpool team?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you spend 120 million on Alexander Isak, you play him where he played, where he's been so good for Newcastle. I mean, he will lead the line. I think, penny for Hugo Ekitike's thoughts. He's excelled at Eintracht Frankfurt as kind of like the main front man. He had an amazing season, and obviously he's got this big move to Liverpool. And now it looks like he probably won't be playing as the centre forward if they go and sign Isak. So that's an interesting one. I think at least Ekitike has said in the past that he does like playing with a strike partner, and I think both of them, Isak and Ekitike, they're pretty dynamic type forwards. Like they're not just going to be, neither of them are just going to be sort of like dedicated to the penalty area. So I would hope for their sake that bodes well. I mean, you could potentially have like instances where they're maybe rotating between themselves in games. I don't think that's out of the question. But certainly, I think if you're spending loads of money on Isak, I mean, he's so good. We know how good he is. But someone who's scored 62 goals and 10 assists, I think, in 109 games for Newcastle. Like, you spend a lot of money on him. You play him where he wants to play. So for Ekitike, it might just have to be a case of being patient, maybe playing second fiddle, sort of fitting in around Isak. But I think the good thing about that is Ekitike is such a talented, dynamic forward. So I think Liverpool are probably onto quite a good thing there, and it'll be fascinating to see how they link up. But also, you've got to remember the other players they have in the front line as well. Obviously, Salah had an incredible season. I think the most goal involvements ever in a Premier League season. And then obviously Florian Wirtz, who's obviously just signed from Bayer Leverkusen. So it's all quite mouth-watering prospect for Liverpool, and I think there's a lot for them to be excited about. Not just with Isak, but how he links up with what they've already got, which is a pretty incredible front line. And it's also important to remember that it's good to be well stocked in attack. We have to don't forget that Salah's likely to be out for roughly a month or so for the AFCON in January, February. So Arne Slot's going to want to have plenty of world-class talent available to him, and so that they kind of don't miss him too much while he's gone. It's a pretty exciting prospect for Liverpool fans.
given that Salah is obviously going to go off to AFCON, and it's slightly longer this time, isn't it? So he'll be gone from, I think it's, before Christmas to most of January, depending on how well Egypt do. Obviously, Arne Slot last season as well, he tended to just use his 11, didn't he? There weren't that many people that tended to... He wasn't that keen on rotating players. So do you think that's playing part of the role? Is he bringing in all these strike options so that he can rotate that little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, Arne Slot will be hopeful that is the case. He's going to be... His target is going to be playing in every single game that they possibly can. So yeah, that's an important fact. That's an important factor, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I think there's another thing that we can look back to last season. Obviously, they played quite a bit of the season with Luis Diaz as kind of playing as a bit of a central forward, and there seemed to be a degree of Arne Slot not quite knowing who he wanted playing, sort of like leading the line sort of for quite a lot of the season. So obviously, sadly, they no longer have Diogo Jota, and obviously he'll be a big miss. But then obviously you had Darwin Núñez, who was, we all know he's inconsistent. He can offer quite a bit, but he's inconsistent and hasn't been a reliable finisher for them. And then of course, Diaz was a reliable player, offered quite a lot, very intense. But of course, he's not there anymore either. So there's a lot for Arne Slot to take into consideration, and the fact that they will hopefully, from their perspective, play so many games that has to come into consideration.
Obviously, there are some other moving pieces in this whole saga. We've heard rumours of Benjamin Šeško, whether he's potentially on the list for Newcastle, Ollie Watkins, but it seems like Man United have kind of made that pin for Šeško, saying that he's now their top striker target for the summer. He doesn't have the Premier League experience that Ruben Amorim tends to go for, but he is one of the most highly rated young footballers in Europe now. Like, how prolific is he? What do you think he could do for Man United?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of being prolific, I would certainly say, he's scored a good amount of goals in the Bundesliga over the last couple of seasons. I think it's 27 over the 2 seasons, I believe. So I mean, he does have it's a decent record for someone who's 22 years old. But I think the key thing to kind of take into consideration with Šeško going to Man United is kind of looking a little bit at like the player that they already have there. So Rasmus Højlund last summer, I think most Man United fans would have been sick to the teeth of watching him getting bullied by centre backs. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think there's a potential player there, but it wasn't working last season. It just wasn't. He didn't seem to be strong enough, physical enough, and he didn't get chances. Now that could be partly down to creativity, and there might be an argument to say, right, well, they've got Cunha and Mbeumo now, so perhaps things will change, but you don't know that that's going to change. I think with Šeško, he will offer more, like in a broader sense. He's nearly two meters tall. He's extremely quick. He's strong. So theoretically, he's going to have less of an issue with the physical side that perhaps Højlund did. And then it comes down to like the finishing as well. I think a perception that I've had of Højlund watching him, it's quite a lot of his finishing can be quite scruffy, and not especially clinical. Whereas I think one of the kind of the main things that people will notice about Šeško is, I mean, he has that, without wanting to go quote Alan Partridge too much, but foot like a traction engine comes to mind. He's got such a powerful strike on him, and we're kind of like balancing that up against like what we've seen from Højlund so far. I mean, that in itself is kind of that's worth bearing in mind. That kind of the power that he generates in his kind of his finishing technique. I mean, that alone can turn mediocre chances into good ones. We've seen it at RB Leipzig. Like this kind of that style of play, it means he's not so much like your classic penalty area predator, like maybe Ollie Watkins could be being considered. So that kind of the fact that they've deviated maybe from Watkins and gone for Šeško, that's quite interesting. So yeah, he's potentially not that kind of penalty area predator, which maybe some United fans might feel that they needed. But he offers so much. He's got so many strings to his bow. He's still only 22, so he's got years and years to progress and get better at in the areas that maybe he's less impressive in. But in terms of like the physical side, he looks like a pretty good fit for the Premier League, and I would say as an all-round player, who's someone who's maybe going to get more involved in sort of like build-up or whatever, I would say he's a more impressive player technically all-round than Rasmus Højlund. And I think looking back to Ruben Amorim at Sporting, kind of his main centre-forward there was Victor Gyökeres, and of course when Arsenal signed Gyökeres, but the two players that they were kind of mulling over were Gyökeres and Šeško. And yeah, United haven't been able to get Gyökeres for whatever reason, but Šeško is kind of a little bit more of that ilk, of kind of like an explosive centre forward who might be able to do things on his own while as well being like an actual threat on the end of creativity. So yeah, I think if Man United pull this off, I think Šeško will be one of the players that I think neutrals are kind of most interested in seeing the development of, and it'll be fascinating to watch and see if he's able to kind of cope any better than Højlund.
And on that, surely, if Man United do manage to get this over the line, that's got to be a good window for them with who they've already brought in.
I would say so. I mean, I think when they went into the summer, I think they would have been targeting primarily a new centre forward and new players that kind of actually play in the number 10 positions behind the centre forward. Obviously, last season it was Fernandes was obviously playing in one of those roles occasionally, but then towards the end of the season dropped quite a lot deeper. So you had Garnacho on one side and Amad Diallo when he was fit on the other. Well, Amad had a great season, and it'll be really good to see him back, hopefully fit for the full season. I think he could have a great campaign, whether he's playing in that kind of number 10 role, sort of rotating maybe with Mbeumo, or even as the right wing back, whereas he's played a few times last season and on pre-season. But so they've bolstered the two number 10 positions. They've got, well, not yet, but potentially getting kind of the centre forward that they've been keen on, and Šeško is also someone United have they're known to have tracked for many years. So he's someone that they've had a dossier on for a while. So I think they could still probably do with a good like number 6, kind of a defensive midfielder type who's both mobile and good on the ball. Casemiro, we've seen it for the past 2 years. He doesn't have the legs to play that role anymore. He's still a very good technician, but yeah, he doesn't have that. So they kind of need someone who's going to be a bit of a kind of a mix, I suppose, between Ugarte and Kobbie Mainoo. So yes, if they get Šeško, it will have been a good window, but there's definitely still one more position I think that they'll be prioritising, be keen to strengthen.
Absolutely. Another big signing I do want to talk about before you go. We saw Granit Xhaka completing his move from Bayer Leverkusen to obviously newly promoted Sunderland. This seems like a great move for them, and an interesting one for him. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the most fascinating transfers of the window so far. I mean, first of all, it very much highlights the pull of the Premier League. Like, a guy who was kind of like the key cog, if you like, in the team that were German champions this time last year, moving to a promoted team. in the Premier League, and that's notable. But I think obviously we, as Premier League fans or whatever, we know Granit Xhaka, or we have a perception of what he used to be when he was in the Premier League. So I like the feeling. I like the idea that he's been like, he's got this offer and he's been like, I've got a point to prove here. I want to go back to England and prove a few people wrong. I think he's gone back to Germany, and he's been one of the best midfielders in the Bundesliga. Played a vital role in the team that's won 3 trophies. And then and it's not just that he's been playing like gone there and playing loads of short, simple passes or anything like that. No, he's been like although he's had like this metronomic sort of number 6 role, he's provided like incisiveness and purpose in their midfield. And I think I don't know if that's necessarily what people tend to think of him from back in his days at Arsenal. And whether or not that's fair or not, I don't know. But I think a lot of people probably have their opinions of him clouded by his disciplinary record and other things, other kind of controversies that maybe marred parts of his time at Arsenal. And I don't think it's unfair. I don't think he would think it's unfair to highlight those. But he's going to be coming back to the Premier League with point to prove, and there's an argument also that actually maybe he has changed. I think he received 10 or more yellow cards in four of his Premier League seasons at Arsenal, and only no player in Premier League history has received 10 or more yellow cards in more than 4 seasons. So that kind of reputation, it stands to reason. Like he has that reputation for that, just because he picked up so many yellow cards. Whereas in the Bundesliga, certainly last season, he only picked up 3. So it's going to be interesting to see whether he has changed, matured, or if it was just a case of coincidence, perhaps. I'm sure we'll see him flying into a few tackles against Newcastle. I'm sure even neutrals will be interested to see that. But I think he's in a potentially important signing for Sunderland, partly because of like kind of the experience that he brings, and when you balance that with a lot of the other transfer business they've done this summer has been focusing on younger players, and especially in midfield. Sort of the players they brought in midfield and attack. I think Enzo Lefebvre, 25, is the oldest. So Noah Sadiki's 20, I believe. Habib Diarra is 21, and there's potentially 2 players that could be lining up sort of either side of him. And I think that's potentially quite an important part for Sunderland, to bring in someone who's got the Premier League experience. He's got that kind of the know-how, and those younger players will be able to learn from a player who's gone. He's in the Bundesliga. He was one of the best midfielders that there is. So it's quite a coup, and it's going to be fascinating to see, if he's changed, and if he has, if it's for the better or not.
Yeah, I think it's just 6 of their current squad have actually got top flight experience. So it's a fascinating signing, and it will be so interesting to watch and see how it all plays out. Ryan, Benson, thank you so much for joining me. You've been watching The Window, brought to you by talkSPORT and talkSPORT Bet.